Hello, my name is Bill Labaris. I am Senior Editorial Director at IDG's Custom Solutions Group, and I want to welcome you to this webcast in which our special guest speakers are going to clearly demonstrate how IT can take a lot of the fear out of the consumerization trend and actually gain control to the benefit of the organization, to the benefit of users, and of course to the benefit of IT as well. I think you'll agree this is a very timely webcast given the rapid emergence of consumerization as a primary driver of business a primary business driver of change. Now, this webcast is initially being broadcast to a live audience, and if you are in this live audience today, you can interact with our speakers during the course of this webcast simply by using the Ask a Question feature on your player. You just type your question in and then hit Submit, and the question will come over to us. And we'll be stockpiling these questions and getting to them at the Q&A portion of our webcast later on. In addition, you can, if you're looking at the slides and you can't really see them all that clearly, you just click on the Enlarge Slides button, and it's a toggle switch back and forth between a full-screen version of the slides and the thumbnail version that you probably see up there right now. And just to let you know, the slides that you see here are available both to the live audience and, of course, subsequently to the on-demand audience simply by hitting the Download Slides button. Okay? That pretty much does it for housekeeping items. Now, for years, if not really for decades, if you think about it, information technology trends were first developed in the business world, and then eventually they trickled down into the consumer sector. I think personal computers, which emerged in the early 80s, are probably a pretty good example of this. But today, it's really increasingly the tail that's wagging the dog in many important ways. Consumers, as well as employees of just about every organization, are purchasing smartphones and tablets by the millions. In fact, I saw some data recently that it's striking. In 2011, which is now, sales of smartphones and tablets are going to easily exceed the total global sales of PCs. And if you go out just a couple years, around 2013, sales of smartphones and tablets will more than double the sales of PCs. And that's striking when you think of it, because tablets haven't even been around all that long. These consumers, these employees, they aren't just buying them for their own personal use. That's the key here. In many cases, in fact, probably in most cases, they're bringing them to work and they want IT to support these devices as endpoints or as clients to access corporate applications and manipulate sensitive company data. They also want the same very high levels of application performance and data access that they can pretty much get on their own today. Now, this consumerization trend has rightfully alarmed IT management in many cases. There are questions around the impact on data security, questions on risk management, and a lot of questions on compliance. For example, what will supporting a growing number and variety of devices do to the already strained internal IT human resources at your place? How does IT ensure that sensitive company data remains secure pretty much on any mobile device? Are there any best practices out there to help IT get a handle on consumerization without frustrating the users who, if you don't help them out, they might fashion their own workarounds anyway? These and a lot of other pretty compelling questions are about to be served up and addressed by our two guest speakers. Now, before I bring up the first of those speakers, we do have some interactive features of this particular webcast strictly for our live audience, and that is two audience poll questions, and this is the first of them. And I'll read it to you, and then you can click off all that apply here in those little boxes there. So the question is, what concerns do you have about employees using their own personal tablets, their smartphones, and their personal laptops to access and manipulate your company's data? Now check all that apply, and they include data security, compliance and regulatory concerns, the expense of supporting diverse devices, IT losing control when it comes to mixing business and personal use of bring your own devices, and if you have no concerns, then that's fine. You sleep well at night. So just please go ahead and check the ones that you feel are most relevant. And while those are being tabulated, I'm going to formally introduce our first speaker, who is Mick Hollison. Now, Mick is Vice President of Marketing and Strategy at Citrix, and as such, he leads integrated product marketing and strategy for the $2 billion provider of cloud computing solutions. Mick Hollison is also responsible for the creation of integrated product messaging, marketing strategy, and marketing operations. And I see from his bio he's also charged with, quote, dramatically improving the customer and partner experience. And so that's a handful for him. Mick, welcome to the webcast today.
Thanks very much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, let's first, Mick, take a look at the poll results here, with the question being what concerns do you have about employees using their own devices here. And wow, obviously security is right up there, and very few people have no concerns at all. Mick Hollison, what do you make of these results?
Really pretty much to be expected, Bill. I think as we have conducted our own surveys over time with thousands of different customers and companies from a variety of different vertical industries, we've discovered the same thing, and the predominant overwhelming concern is in the data security arena, although dependent on industry, compliance and regulatory concerns often pop up very high as well. So, really from our point of view, to be expected, but increasingly there are a number of ways, some brought to you from companies like our own and some from others, for dealing with the majority of those concerns. And, nothing's perfect, but at the same time, I think, we can expect companies to continue to come up with inventive ways to address these concerns, because the reality of people bringing their own devices into the workplace is really kind of an unstoppable force at this juncture.
Well, actually, that's a good segue into the broader conversation we want to have with you. IT over the years has certainly seen its share of fads, things that come and go. So what makes you think that consumerization, as we've talked about it here, is actually real and not just another passing fad?
Yeah, absolutely. We believe, as do a number of key industry analysts, that consumerization is probably the single biggest force that will create change in IT and business over the course of the next decade or so. And you made a point earlier about the big change into the PC era. And when I entered the workforce and was handed my several $1,000 compact lunchbox with dual 5.25-inch floppies, I thought that was the greatest thing in the world. And it was beyond my reach as an employee to go and purchase such a device at that point in time. It had lots of great capabilities to it, and really only my company could afford such a thing. And subsequent to that, the consumer-oriented devices have, A, become radically more cost-effective, and B, more capable than they ever were. And in many instances today, what you as a consumer can walk into a Best Buy and purchase is a greatly better device than the one, your sort of standard issued gray laptop that gets handed to you by your IT department. So I think what's happened here is the accessibility of much more cost-friendly devices that are highly capable has really driven consumers to adopting those things, and they expect them, I think rightfully, to be able to work in their workplace. Bill, did we lose you there?
No, Mick, just go right ahead and continue with your presentation, if you would.
Terrific. If we could move to the next slide, great. Thank you. So the rest of what we have uncovered with some surveys, some that we began early at the beginning of this year, and some that we conducted as recently as the middle part of 2011, have turned up some pretty amazing and interesting results. The first one was that we really believe that, apparently so do the companies we surveyed, that the office can be anywhere. And pretty amazing results if you think about it here. If you add up really the first the bottom three there, people working outside of the office 1 to 2 days, 3 to 4 days, or every day of the work week, you get a pretty overwhelming number there. You're looking at nearly 80% of workers work outside of the office from in any given time period. And moreover, our survey ended up determining that about 1/3 of all of these workers are using unsanctioned apps and websites independent of whether or not the company, quote, permitted that use or not. And the vast majority of these people weren't doing it with any kind of evil desires in mind. They actually just thought it was okay. And the reasons that were cited for doing this were that whatever app they were accessing provided something that was better than what their company provided them to use at work. It allowed them to use whatever they were doing both at home and at work. Often these applications were deemed to be much, much simpler than the kind of very, very large-scale monolithic applications that are rolled out in a lot of enterprises. And really it just allowed them to get very important work done and allowed what I think is a practical reality now for most people, which is a bit of blurring of personal and professional life. So again, whether it's the devices or it's the applications that people are choosing to utilize, the practical reality is that it's hitting the workforce and it's doing so in droves. We went on to ask some people how many different computing devices that they used in any given workday. And again, the statistics here were pretty overwhelming. 42% of them used 3 devices in any given day, most typically a smartphone, a tablet, and a PC. So what we referred to as BYOC at one point has really in many ways become what we refer to as BYO3. And people are using the device that is most convenient and most purpose-built for whatever task that they happen to be trying to accomplish. So if they just want to be alerted to information or they want to send something very, very quick and simple along the lines of a text message, a smartphone is ideal for that. If they want to consume a little bit more information and hear and see media, then something like a tablet is more appropriate. And if they want to actually create content, then a full-on laptop is the most appropriate device. So, in any given day, you're seeing people utilize a number of different device categories here. Now, after that initial study that we conducted at the beginning of the year, we decided that we wanted to gain more insight, and we at Citrix conducted a much, much broader study to thousands of customers around the globe, and a full 92% of those indicated that they were aware that their employees were using personally owned devices for work purposes, and in any organization that had already put forth some kind of a formalized bring your own policy, 28% of them were choosing to use their personal devices as opposed to whatever was being issued by the company. Now, one of the things that I thought was kind of striking, this number was much higher than I think we anticipated it would be, was that 44% of the customers we polled already had some form of BYO policy. Now, admittedly, that was frequently just about smartphones and not explicitly about laptops or tablets, but still a pretty high number. And then the overwhelming majority, 94% of them, expected to have a formal policy in place by the 2013 time frame, by which time, as you mentioned earlier, Bill, we think tablets will really be running wild in the enterprise and elsewhere. And the top reasons that were cited by the companies that we asked about this and the organizations we asked, the number one reason was to attract and retain the highest possible quality talent. As the demographics shift, particularly here in North America, by the end of 2012, there will be more people from the digital generation, Y generation, echo boomers, if you will, in the workforce than there will be baby boomers. And these people grew up digital, and they expect to have the latest and the greatest in both applications and in the devices that they use to get their work done. So if you want to attract those people and retain them, you need to give them a great computing experience. And then secondarily, from a business point of view, the number one reason cited was simply to increase productivity and employee satisfaction. And in all instances where we've seen BYO programs rolled out, we've actually seen productivity rise as people spend more time when they're not necessarily in the office getting work done. And that ends up in the bottom line for any company. And then finally, really the key to unlocking a lot of this was deemed to be desktop virtualization as a key to unlocking the benefits of bring your own policies, predominantly because it really helps address some of the primary concerns that were cited earlier in the polling, meaning that it helps address those security and regulatory compliance issues, because when you virtualize your desktop and the associated applications, the data from those typically continues to reside in the data center rather than residing on the endpoint devices. So of the companies that were kind of interested in BYO, 62% of them had a plan to invest in desktop virtualization, and the overwhelming majority of those were using it as an enabler for their BYO programs. So pretty interesting metrics that came back from us on this one. To carry that a little bit further, we wanted to learn how this was rolling out and taking place across the globe. And of course, you'd expect pretty high uptake here in North America and in the U.S. and Canada, and you definitely see that on the chart that you're looking at here. I recognize this one's a bit small. As Bill mentioned, we'll provide you with a copy of the presentation later. But one of the really standout figures from my point of view was the numbers that you see there from India, where there are an immense number of contract employees and people that are working in outsourced situations, and it really, BYO makes an immense amount of sense there. So the employee already has their laptop, and independent of who they go to work for, they can gain access to the company's information in a really safe and secure way. So India kind of leading the way as it relates to BYO adoption. Now, finally, really think that at this juncture, we are seeing a tipping point. And as I mentioned before, some 94% of the companies that we spoke to believe they'll have some kind of a formalized BYO policy in place in the next 2 years. So we think this is leaving the status as something that's happening in kind of small adoption numbers and kind of only happening for futuristic, really kind of leading edge kind of companies, and really dipping straight into the mainstream. So that's what we see happening with BYO. We feel like it's happening at an accelerated pace, probably far faster than any of us would have imagined if we went back in time a year or two.
Yeah, Carlson, I completely concur with you here. Of all the data we've seen here at IDG, and we develop and aggregate a lot of it, there's no question that this consumerization trend is not only building, but it is accelerating. I think what's going to happen with the features that are going to be available in increasingly less expensive tablets is really going to push this very, very actively. So I guess the question is, what are we going to do about it? Typically, what do your customers tell you when you ask them about the real benefits of enabling a broader footprint of personal devices such as iPads and Mac laptops?
Yeah, it's a great question, and as we conducted this survey, one of the things that we did is asked these customers what they saw as the predominant benefits, and overwhelmingly number one was improved employee satisfaction, and I think that one really kind of rises above all others. So they saw employees that were happier with doing the work that they needed to get done because they were able to do it in innovative ways. I'll share with all of you a very brief story from a colleague of mine, happens to be the CIO of Emory Healthcare. We're going to hear from another healthcare customer here very shortly on this call. And the CIO of Emory called me nearly a year ago and said, Mick, I really need you to fly to Atlanta and come help me out. My head of surgery has gone rogue, as she put it. And what she meant by that was that the head of surgery had gone out on their own accord and purchased 50 iPads. Why? Because he could. And he handed out these iPads like chiclets to all of his surgeons, and of course immediately wanted to be able to access Emory's Cerner Millennium healthcare applications using those iPads. So with a little bit of help from us at Citrix in getting things set up properly for Emory, they were able to turn that on. And what was really fascinating is that some of the apps, some of which were very, very old Windows apps, actually came to life a bit in the iPad, meaning that when you wanted to zoom in on an image, in particular images of angiograms in their case, that was kind of a very difficult set of keystrokes to do in the old Windows app. but the native gestures of the iPad worked with that app when it was delivered through Citrix Receiver. So the employees not only got as good of an experience as they would have gotten with the native Windows PC, in many respects, they got a better one. They got an iPad touch-friendly kind of experience. So that surgeon's experience went up dramatically, and the experience of all of those associated workers went up. So kind of a great little story to share with all of you there. So in the end, what we've heard, Bill, from customers, end users, and IT alike, is that the people, are more satisfied because they get to choose their own device. They get to the applications they want to get to in an on-demand fashion, and they can get their work done any place they happen to be, whether it's sitting in a Starbucks, working from home in their kitchen, or right in the office. IT, on the flip side, can gain centralized control of the delivery of these applications and, more importantly, of the data, so that it remains secure and compliant, and they get to focus on more strategic things than break fix of endpoint devices and PCs, since in most instances BYO programs have the employee actually responsible for maintaining and supporting that endpoint device. And last but certainly not least, the business itself gets higher productivity out of the employees. It gets happier employees, and when you get that, you really get a competitive edge over your competition. So those were all great benefits that we've seen and heard from our customers about as we've asked them about the benefits of BYO, Bill.
Great. So to some extent, the bottom line is, look, it's inevitable. The benefits potentially are tremendous, and it's a perfect fit, for the growing generation of workers that we have, the millennials as we call them. Mick, I know that Citrix internally has adopted a BYO program to help employees achieve these benefits that we're talking about here. Tell us a little bit more about that program and what kind of feedback you've gotten from your employees as it's been rolled out.
Yeah, absolutely. We're definitely eating our own cooking as it relates to BYO programs. We've been an early advocate of this kind of thing, and we have adopted it very much ourselves. We now have north of 1,000 employees enrolled in our BYO program. We're predominantly signing these up as new employees join the company, or as people's existing PCs reach their depreciation level. We're then offering them the choice to sign up for BYO, and overwhelmingly they're making that choice. One of the interesting things that's been an outcome of this program for us, and be happy to provide you some more insight from our CIO, Paul Martini, on how we calculated this, but we've actually seen about a 20% expense savings versus traditional managed desktop. So I noted that cost was one of the concerns for many of the people. We've actually seen cost savings through the deployment of this program. And the other interesting thing that we've found out, and this may be a little bit of a remnant of being a high-tech company, but we've actually seen a huge number of our employees spend more on their computers than the stipend that the company provides them, so that those individuals can buy really the device they've always dreamed of and wanted. Not too long ago, I brought a new director on board to my team. They opted for the BYO program, and they immediately went and bought the biggest, baddest iMac that they could. It actually went considerably beyond the stipend, but that employee is so ecstatic and happy to be using that device every day. It was well worth the extra few $100 for them to buy exactly what they wanted. Along those lines, about half of our employees have actually chosen Macs as their device of choice, although the corporate desktop and applications that we're providing to them are all Windows-based. So they've ended up choosing Macs in spite of the fact that the actual work environment is a Windows work environment. And last but not least, people are really enjoying doing this for both personal and professional use. We don't really deem anything that they're doing on the personal side. That's up to them. We don't try to manage or maintain that in any way, but we do cordon off and kind of create a bit of a bubble for their professional use and make sure all of that data stays safe and secure in the data center. So we've had great results from the program. We couldn't be more delighted with it, Bill.
That's excellent, and thanks for pointing out that the savings figure here. That's pretty impressive, and you also touched upon the fact that you've been able to deal, obviously, very successfully with the compliance and security issues that popped up in our first audience poll question. Mick Hollison, thanks very much. We're going to be rejoining you in a couple of minutes here. We want to bring up our second guest speaker here. Before we do, two things. First, I want to remind those of you in the live audience that if you have questions for Mick or for Mark Farrow, our next speaker, just go ahead and stick your questions into the Ask a Question area there, and we'll get to them as many as we can when we get to the Q&A portion of the webcast. Next up, we have our second and final audience poll question, and it reads as follows. Again here, check as many of these as you feel apply to you. What do you expect as potential benefits of IT introducing and supporting a bring your own device policy for workers at your place? Do you expect improved worker satisfaction, enhanced productivity of the workforce in general, the ability to attract and retain these high-quality workers everybody wants, assuring security on personal user devices, gaining the control that IT needs and wants, or lowering IT support costs? So just click as many of those as you think apply, if any, and we'll tabulate those in just a minute. And before we do that, I want to bring up our next speaker, Mark Farrow, who is CIO and Assistant Vice President of Information and Communications Technologies at Hamilton Health Sciences up in Canada. Mark has held a very progressive 25-year career in IT and management, and as CIO today, he oversees a $19+ million operating budget and a staff of over 100 IT professionals. Among other things that Mark has done, he has led the process of integrating 6 hospitals and a cancer center into a common integrated system and infrastructure, and he has also been busily at work working with a lot of regional providers and network services and so forth, and the local health integration network. So Mark Farrow, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Bill.
Let's take a look at the results of this next audience poll here to the question of what do you expect as potential benefits of IT introducing a BYO policy here, and worker satisfaction at the top of the list here, along with increased productivity and a lot of other benefits going down here. Mark, from your experience, and we know you're going to talk about some of your own experience with BYO at Hamilton, what do you make of these results?
I think these results are fairly typical. I mean, it's certainly improved worker satisfaction, and Mick talked a lot about that. The productivity of the workforce. I mean, and I think that that's something that we can't discount. And certainly 61% saw that as a potential high value. But absolutely, these are fairly typical results we would expect to see.
Okay. So why don't you tell us about Hamilton Health, Mark, a little bit first, and where we're talking so much about security here, talk about the compliance and regulatory climate that you folks confront over there. But first, tell us a little bit about Hamilton itself.
Certainly, Bill. Hamilton Health Sciences is a family of 6 unique hospitals plus a cancer center. They have been integrated over a number of years and are located throughout the metropolitan Hamilton, Ontario area. We're located just west of Toronto, Ontario, for those of you trying to figure out where we are on the map. Hamilton Health Sciences is also a regional academic teaching center, and it's affiliated with McMaster University. And certainly that leads to one of our big drivers, which is a lot of residents and students and people that are coming and going, but a lot of young people in our system that have really been stretching and challenging us as to what we can deliver for them. We serve a population of about 2.3 million people in the central south, central west Ontario. So, and we've won a number of awards for our successes over the last few years, and notably around a top employer and as well as an award for security. So these are areas that we're very focused on within our organization. We offer a full range of services, essentially the cradle to grave, from the high-risk obstetrics and gynecology right through to the palliative care, rehab care. And we also have 3 extremely busy emergency departments within the organization, servicing across the hospital. So essentially we're approximately 11,000 employees. An important number for us is the 1,000-plus physicians that we are having to deal with, because remember, these are not employees, these are independent contractors who are utilizing our services and needing full access to all of our information, to their applications. And they're, again, one of our driving forces in deciding how we provide services and how we were going to put the systems together. HHS is approximately a $1.2 billion organization, which makes us, I believe, the 3rd largest healthcare organization in Canada. So I think the other important aspect to really focus on is the fact that the environment that we work within, and we are a provincially regulated organization. Healthcare in Ontario and Canada are mostly controlled through the provincial regulations. We have a lot of rules and regulations that are imposed upon us. And we have the Personal Health Information Protection Act, which is a similar act to the HIPAA requirements down in the U.S., and this defines what information is protected, how we have to deal with that information, and any penalties that we have for noncompliance. And of course, we also have a very active watchdog in the Information and Privacy Commissioner in Ontario, and that group reviews any type of breach that's been made within the health system. And one of the things that they can do is, if somebody has a breach, is that they can provide an order to comply, and that order to comply then applies to all of us within the health industry in Ontario, not just necessarily the organization that had a problem. And there have been a number of orders within the last couple of years around laptops and people having laptops stolen and having that data get out there. And there's a whole process that then says, once you've done that, you've got to notify everybody who has potentially had their personal health information breached. And I'm happy to say we have not had any orders to date, and certainly have been able to comply with all of the orders that have the Privacy Commissioner has put out in Ontario to date as well.
Oh, tremendous. So, okay, a great portrait there of what you're dealing with, a large organization, 1,000-plus physicians. I'm sure you have a few of those, what Mick Hollison called rogue physicians out there, like to do things on their own. But most importantly, a lot of compliance, a lot of regulation, because you're dealing with some of the most important secretive data, in terms of stuff that has to be kept private possible. Just so anxious to hear, Mark, how you were able to work within this environment and roll out your own BYOC program. You have a very interesting story to tell us about how you supported consumerization and still maintained this control and security and so forth, and kept the users happy. So tell us about what you did there.
Certainly. We started a relationship with Citrix in around 2004. And really, at the time, the aim was to control the distribution of applications, and how do we get applications out to 5,000 plus desktops? How do we do upgrades and keep current? And so we implemented the ZenApp product for all of our main corporate applications, and trying to control version controlling and getting the applications out there. We were finding we had multiple versions of everything out in our environment, and it was becoming very confusing and very difficult to manage. And then a number of years ago, I attended a conference and heard Mark Templeton, CEO at Citrix, speak, and he started talking about this concept of bring your own device. And that really struck a chord with me because we were already starting to see the challenges of having, the physicians, these independent contractors who were coming into the organization, and the IT department would be saying to them, if you want to connect to our network, you have to buy a PC from us to our specs. We can't use what you're using in your office or what you're using at home. You can only have, our devices. And of course, that was creating a lot of tension within the organization. We then started, over the last few years, seeing more and more of the residents wanting to bring in their own device, wanting to, and because we weren't supporting it, they would then start doing things to go around sort of our corporate policies to get access to data. And so, I came back and I challenged my organization in the IT group and our security group that, a bring your own policy was going to be where we were going to focus. And how were they going to figure that out? Because what I really wanted was to give, at the time, our clients, the option to buy their choice, and specifically the physicians to bring in their choice of laptops and devices. One of the really interesting things was that, we really weren't trying to predict the tablet revolution. I really didn't have a crystal ball that was that clear. But when the tablet revolution came along, essentially we were ready for it. And with the combination of our Citrix environment and a solid network strategy that had focused us to be able to provide sort of that segregated access onto our network for devices that weren't necessarily at our IT standards, and having Citrix in the background, we were ready to go. And you mentioned the rogue physician. Well, our rogue physicians were ones that took off across the border to the U.S., bought up the iPads as soon as on the day they came out, came back up here and said, this is the device we want to start using. And within a couple of days of him returning, we were already supporting the iPad in our environment. And essentially using Citrix Receiver, which was already available, and XenApp, which was in our environment, we were able to connect the users up. They have full access to all of our corporate resources. We're a Meditech hospital, so having access to the Meditech Advanced Clinicals and all of the tool sets that the physicians needed right at their fingertips, on the move, and they were just ecstatic. So, this was something that, our end users were pushing us for. We were able to get out there, literally get out in front of this and get it out to them. And then, as we saw these devices coming in, the IT staff have embraced the change. They've tried to figure out how can we support this. And because we don't necessarily support the devices, and a little like Mick talked about, where we're not maintaining these devices, but what we've done is we've created a SharePoint site and some blogs that allow any of the registered users, and we do ask them to register with us, that they have access to a lot of question and answers, and when they see something coming up, they have that quick ability to either post a comment or ask a question. And that's sort of created, again, an internal community and a lot of innovation at the same time. So we've embraced it, we've supported it, and we're ready for whatever the next device is.
That's extraordinary in terms of being able to have those devices come into the organization that quickly, the iPads in this case, and then to be able to essentially get them up and running and fully supported in a secure way in a matter of days. It's an extraordinary story, and to do so securely, obviously, because you haven't had the law come down on you since then. So you're obviously getting the job done right. So the implementation went well. How about to the key question of benefits? So what are some examples of where Hamilton Health has benefited specifically from what you've done to support consumerization over there, Mark?
Well, I think the big one is that our physicians they're a lot happier now because they can use their device of choice, and we're happy because none of that data is leaving a footprint on the device. So all of it stays in our data center. We don't, there's no ability to print or store the information outside of the data center. We do restrict that on these devices, but they have full access and they have full ability to do their work and literally do their work now wherever. And I think one of the classic examples was a physician that came up to me shortly after we did this, and he said that he had, was on his way home after a long day, had stopped to pick up some food for the family, going to bring dinner home, and he got a phone call saying that one of his patients was having trouble. And so he went back to his car, pulled out his iPad, was parked, I will say, but pulled out his iPad, logged into the system, was able to pull up all of the data on the patient, was able to assess what the issue was, provide the orders needed to change the treatment course, and put his device away, took off, and still got dinner home to his family while it was hot. Normally, he would have had to drive back to the hospital, gone through the charts or the records, seen what was going on, make that change, and then get home. And that could have taken him anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half or more. And so I think, that in itself talks about a change in quality of life for our physicians and quality of care for our patients. So, we're seeing this as a huge success and something that we're going to continue to push.
Outstanding. Well, a great example, great work, and congratulations, Mark, to you and your team over there. We're going to flip back to you in just a minute when we get to the Q&A. I want to bring Mick Hollison back up here, if I can, from Citrix. Mick, listening to Mark, Citrix may hold a key, if not the key, for IT to maintain this control that they need while still providing end users with the freedom that they want and they need to bring their own devices. Go into a little bit more depth, if you would, about the specifics of the Citrix approach here.
Yeah, absolutely, Bill, and thank you so much, Mark, both for your business as well as for the great story that you tell. I'm sure it's been lots of hard work to make all of this happen, but it sounds like it's paying terrific dividends for you guys. And at Citrix, we've been around for quite some time now, a little north of 20 years. But one thing's maintained the same about Citrix is we've gone through lots of changes, made lots of acquisitions, and look quite a bit different than we did a few years back. But one thing's remained the same, and that's been our vision. And our vision is really a world where anyone can work or play from anywhere. And we added that word play because I think years ago, as Mark pointed out, and our Mark Templeton knew a very long time ago, we were going to see this sort of interaction taking place in this intersection between personal and work life. And the story that was just shared with all of you from the front seat of a car and accessing a patient record is exactly the kind of thing that we envisioned and that we want to enable with the technologies that we bring to bear. And, a lot has changed in IT over the course of the past few years here. And I'm not seeing the refresh yet. Here we go. And, if you look at today's IT model, it really has IT in the middle. So if you look at sort of the distributed computing world that we all live in, apps are these big, large systems managed by IT. IT's right there in the center trying to manage both the apps and the data. The devices are standardized for reasons to try to simplify support and keep costs down. And people are thought of as users of these IT systems. I can only think of one other industry that refers to people as users. It's not a super flattering comparison. But in the new world that we see taking place here in the Citrix approach, it's quite a bit different. And with the Citrix approach, we see people moving to the center. Apps become both things that are accessed internal to your organization and things that might be accessed external to your organization. Certainly with the advent of cloud-based computing and software as a service types of applications, for example, the Salesforce.coms of the world, and data needs to be something that's available independent of what app or device you're running. Many of you out there may be Netflix users. They're a great example of this. And regardless of what device you're on, you can continue watching your content, your media, independent of that device. And the data itself still resides, up in the cloud somewhere. Very similar kind of a model that we envision for Citrix with your applications and data. You can view them, interact with them, but the data itself remains in a secure place, and you can access them from any kind of a device. So people really move to the center of this model. Devices get chosen based on convenience and appropriateness for the task, and IT becomes way more concerned about service delivery and governance than they are about these big monolithic apps and controlling devices and so forth. So quite a bit of a different model that we foresee moving forward here. So, in the end, what we see is IT becoming a service delivery mechanism, one that can help deliver a lower cost means of providing computing and technology to end users with better security and still enabling greater control. And in the end, from a Citrix point of view, what that really means is better ways for people and IT to work together. And we've been amassing over the course of the past several years a really complete end-to-end product portfolio to address those needs, all the way from collaboration, things like our go-to products, all the way to providing full, robust cloud infrastructure like what we're doing via our cloud.com and our Cloud Stack products. So with all those things in mind, Citrix has been kind of at this for a while, really trying to enable virtual work styles for people on the one hand and virtual data centers for IT on the other. So that's really got it covered there, Bill.
Mick, Citrix is broadly acknowledged as the leader in desktop virtualization today, and you're hinting around desktop virtualization as the enabling solution for a lot of this BYOC. So what can organizations expect when taking this approach to supporting employee purchase devices?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in many respects, Zen Desktop, which brings both virtualizing the entire desktop as well as virtualizing just independent applications in a seamless manner, is the industry's first kind of revolutionary system for bringing virtual desktops to end users. And we have a variety of ways to provide those virtual desktops, but it all comes in one enterprise complete product. And over the course of the past couple of years, as you kindly pointed out there, Bill, Zen Desktop's really become the gold standard in this desktop virtualization arena. And with the latest version of the product, we bring this any device, anywhere capability with Receiver. Receiver is a free download available for anybody who wants to gain access to their Zen Desktop or Zen app systems via virtually any kind of device. We ensure that the users get a good experience, meaning that even robust media plays back with high fidelity, so an HDX or high definition user experience. So no longer do you have kind of what you used to have many, many years ago with sort of the kung fu effect, as I refer to it, where audio and video get out of sync, much, much richer user experience. Going beyond VDI with FluxCast, and while VDI is something that has a lot of industry attention and buzz, in our view, it's just one way of bringing a virtual desktop to end users, and there are other more cost-effective means of doing that as well, and those are all baked into the Zen Desktop product. Finally, you need single sign-on, easy one login access to all of your Windows, web, and SaaS applications, all from one enterprise app store. So much like iTunes brings all of your music and media together in one rich, easy-to-use sort of self-service experience, we're doing that through a Receiver interface that brings you your full application storefront to bear in one UI. And then lastly, we're very focused on remaining open, scalable with this product and this technology. So if you want to run on a different virtualization infrastructure, perhaps on VMware's or on Microsoft's with their Hyper-V offering, we're absolutely going to support that, and we're not going to ask you to change out those core pieces of infrastructure unless you just prefer to work with the Citrix Zen Server technology. So very, very open as well. Now, last but certainly not least here on Zen Desktop is that we're going to enable you to have access to all of these applications, desktops, even and data. We've just made an announcement here in the past that just happened today as it relates to Follow Me data, and really enabling anywhere access from any device. There's no other vendor in the marketplace today that gives you a native experience on everything from Android devices to Apple devices right on up to full Mac and Windows PCs. So a rich set of Follow Me services. Last thing that I would mention on that front as it relates to receiver and the ability to get to all of these devices is what you heard a little bit earlier from Mark as it related to his experience with Hamilton. It really gives IT and CIOs in particular the power to say yes to new devices. So as these things change and morph, and you're going to have different winners and losers, and you're going to have different devices coming to the market from RIM and their BlackBerry offerings to Samsung with Android and Windows-based offerings to Apple with their iOS-based offerings. Independent of those, you really are going to be able to say yes to all of these new devices through the power of Citrix Receiver. And then, as I mentioned before, it's super important that you provide these services with a high-fidelity experience. I'm actually engaging with all of you today and doing this presentation via my own Zen Desktop virtual desktop experience. I'm getting a full, rich Windows 7 experience through a wide Zenith Zero client, and I am working effortlessly through this process with all of you today. That's the power that HDX really helps bring to the table. And then just to make sure that we really land and hit home on this final point around security, because this was sort of the number one thing that came up, we ensure that the data is fully encrypted through the full transmission. So any data that you're interacting with, the applications you're interacting with, all that's traveling over the wires or over the wireless network, if it were, is encrypted bits of really mostly bitmaps and images, not even the full data construct itself. And so we really protect the data all the way from the data center down to where it's rendered on the endpoint. And through a variety of access control policies, you're able to do things like Mark has mentioned with Hamilton, where you can limit the ability of the end user to even do things like printing or saving to a USB stick if you're really, really concerned about that data going anywhere other than the data center.
Perfect, Mark. Last couple of slides I know you have coming up. We've got a bunch of questions lined up, and so if you just kind of quickly take us through.
Yeah, I'll wrap up. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sure, what people might do to basically get started if they're considering a desktop virtualization project here.
Absolutely. I'm mindful to get to a couple questions here myself. So, I know a lot of the questions were really around, how do I get started? Maybe you're interested in this at this point. And we believe that the best way to do this is to take an assessment of your own organization. Take a look at your own company, the profile of the users that you have within it, and identify what your core business priorities are. If it's to enable anytime, everywhere access for your physicians or for your attorneys or for other business people in your organization, then identify that. Pick the right group of users so you can get the most value the most quickly. This is, in other words, start with kind of low-hanging fruit. Don't solve for the most difficult use case first. And then lastly, define a transformation roadmap for moving to a new way of delivering desktops and delivering applications. And then, last but not least, obviously we at Citrix would love for you to contact us about our virtual computing story and any ways in which we can help you guys. So with that, I think we can quickly, Bill, move to some final Q&A here to wrap things up.
Yeah, sure. And let me just let everybody know, we have a lot of questions here, more than we're going to be able to answer. Citrix will get answers to you by email for the questions that we don't get to today. We've got some great questions. Let's get right to them. Let's see. I'm going to direct this one to you, Mark. What are the mix of tablet devices in OSs within your environment? iOS, Android, Win 7, et cetera. Just talk a little bit about what mix you are supporting at this point.
Mostly at this point it's on the iPad, the iOS. That seems to have been the popular device of choice. Very little in the way of Android, and we're a heavy user of BlackBerry. Just started using Playbooks because Citrix Receiver was just released in the last month or so for the Playbook, so that's now starting to come into the organization as well.
So I guess maybe a follow-on question might be then, so if Android, for example, became popular with one of your physicians, would you expect any problem in supporting it?
Not at all, no. And that's the beauty of this, is that we really literally don't care what's on the back end, because all we're doing is giving a screen paint out to that device, and everything else is being done in the back end. And our network segments these devices from anything else, so there's no risks of viruses or Trojans or anything else getting into the organization.
Great. Mick, question for you. Does data security, in talking about Citrix obviously, include technology like wireless keyboard keystrokes and transactions via smartphones?
Yeah, there are always going to be the bad guys will always have some means of getting to things, and we are working in labs around dealing with things like key logging and figuring out a way to help address that. We're also partnering with third-party companies that provide mobile device security above and beyond what we do at Citrix. As an example, we're in some early discussions with Good around providing security for things that might reside locally on those devices. So those are definitely arenas that we are looking into and always mindful and kind of vigilant about. But it's an ongoing battle, right? The bad guys will always be looking for new and inventive ways to crack the code, so to speak. And it's incumbent upon us to try to stay as far ahead of them as we possibly can.
Okay, great. Next question here. Mick, you can also reflect on your own experience here, but the question is, in the BYO scenario, won't IT be spending more time troubleshooting the various user systems? Because without system standards in place, won't the time to help be drastically increased as more users ask for help?
Yeah, I suppose everyone's mileage may vary there a little bit, Bill, but I can tell you from firsthand experience at Citrix, we actually there's only two things we require of our users as they sign up for the BYO program. And one is that they do go ahead and download our standard antivirus of choice. In our case, it happens to be McAfee. And the second is that they buy a 3-year support and maintenance agreement with the hardware manufacturer. So any actual hardware support-related issues are 100% incumbent upon the end user. I'm a big Mac guy. I own a MacBook Air. I recently had a little bit of a screen-related issue. I took it to my local Mac Genius bar, and within about 30 minutes had the device back working exactly as I had intended it for. With all due respect to my wonderful IT organization, I've never had that fast of response time from my own IT organization, and most typically when I hand them the device, I expect it to get re-imaged before it's handed back to me. So we've actually had a better experience and lower support cost as a result of moving to this model, not a higher support cost.
Okay. Mark, for you, are you comfortable that the users, who are mostly doctors in your organization, have an adequate separation between how they use their tablets for hospital use versus personal use, or is that even a concern of yours?
It actually really becomes less of a concern now, because as I said, the Citrix receiver keeps all of our corporate data completely segregated. Our network is set up such that they can come onto this network and they've got a choice of getting into Citrix, getting to their email, or getting out to the internet. And we do prevent the ability to download to a USB key or to anything else. I mean, basically we restrict all that. We restrict printing. Unless if you're on the internal network, you can print. If you're coming through the gateway and you're on an external network, you can't print either. So, you really aren't using their personal apps to access any of our data, and vice versa. And as well, I think that there's less drive for them to necessarily go out and build their own app or do something because they've got full access to their corporate data that they need. And that was one of the challenges before, was that when we weren't providing them tools, they were out trying to write applications or do things to figure out how to suck data out of the system, and they don't need to do that now because all of that information and those applications are at their fingertips.
Terrific. We get time for just one more question. Again, let me just tell you in the audience, we've got many more than we can answer. We will get email answers to you, to each and every one of you within a few days. Last question here. Looks like it's for Mick. Are there trends you're seeing in what BYO policies include, or perhaps should include, or specifically don't include?
Yeah, I think one of the things that was surprising to us on that was that a lot of the existing IT policies we had in place for both securing of data and what we expected of employees in terms of protection of intellectual property actually already applied, and then we were just able to move those over to the BYO kind of environment. We've not really had to place any new set of limitations around this. We have had to look at adjustments of the stipend and making sure that we've got the right dollar amount to enable employees to buy exactly what they want. In our case, it's actually granted as compensation, so tax comes back out of it, and so those calculations can differ in different locations, and we've had to make some minor modifications there to make sure we can get employees the right dollar amount to go and buy a very adequate device for their particular requirements. But outside of that, the original policies we set forth have pretty much held true.
All right, guys. Well, look, that was a lightning round of questions here. Mark Farrow from Hamilton Health and Mick Hollison from Citrix, thank you guys both very much for joining us today. A terrific presentation.
Thanks very much, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
And I want to thank all of you out in the audience here, both the live and on-demand audiences, for joining us. Now, before we sign off, I want to direct your attention to some additional resources that you can access absolutely free of charge. You see them here on your screen right now. They're all clickable. I want to draw your attention in particular to the CIO Executive Brief, which is called the Key. So, on the behalf of our webcast sponsor, which is Citrix, I'm Bill Laveris from IDG saying thank you all very much for joining us today.